Welcome to Beyond the B, an ongoing dialogue about the past, present, and future of the B Corp movement. Co-hosts Emmy Allison and Ryan Honeyman facilitate an open and honest conversation about the B Corp movement, advise companies on how to increase their impact, and provide a deep dive into the new B Corp standards that are shaping our community.
I'm Ryan Honeyman, a partner at Lift Economy. And today I'm excited to have not one, but three guests to join to talk about the B Corp movement in Asia. And so I'll name each of my guests here. So my first guest is Nozomi from the B Market Builder Japan. And Nozomi serves as CEO of Value Books, Inc. She joined Value Books, an online book buyer and seller in Nagano, Japan in 2015, bringing her experience from the financial sector. In 2022, Value Books published a Japanese translation of the B Corp Handbook, second edition, which I worked with Nozomi on. Thank you so much, Nozomi. As a community-based project in collaboration with Black Swan Publishers. Since then, the community has expanded and has been driving the B Corp movement in Japan. And in March 2024, B Market Builder Japan was founded. In October 2024, Value Books, Inc. was certified as a B Corp. Congrats on that, Nozomi, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Ryan. So happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
And my next guest is Cecilia Ho. Cecilia has a diverse background in education, social services, and hospitality. At B Lab Singapore, she guides companies on impact management using the B Impact Assessment tool and leads workshops on B Lab standards and theory of change. Prior to joining B Lab, she managed operations at Minds Bakers, a social enterprise supporting the intellectually disabled. Cecilia is passionate about promoting responsible business practices, advocating for environmental sustainability, inclusivity, and social justice. Cecilia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm excited to be part of this discussion.
And last but not least, we have Sally. Sally Rin is the director of B Community, B Corp China, and the founder of Diversibility Lab. In June 2020, Sally joined the Leping Social Entrepreneur Foundation after having spent over 9 years in the international education industry. Her focus now is on B community building and serving a global movement of people using business as a force for good, supporting business leaders to use their skills, voices, and resources to create a more sustainable future. Sally, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
Sure. So maybe, Sally, why don't we just start with you? And my first question is, how did you first get interested in doing this type of work? Like, how did you get into this type of work? And then maybe how did you first hear about the B Corp movement?
Oh, it's an interesting story. So I used to work for a Aussie company for about 8 to 9 years. So during that period, I also took the corporate social responsibility role. So as part of my job, I used to work with a lot of companies, and we also went to a lot of NGOs doing like social works. So when the global pandemic struck, I have to say we were very employee-focused company. So we focus on the staff welfare and safety are our first priorities. So during the pandemic, this unexpected isolation period, for me, substantial time for online exploration. So during which I first discovered the B Corp concept and the story started.
Yeah. And so you found it and then you joined in June 2020.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Okay. I found B Corp China online. Yeah.
Wow. That's great. And maybe Cecilia, maybe same question. How did you come to this work and how did you first hear about the B Corp movement?
Oh, thank you, Ryan. Yeah, also quite by chance, I think. So after the pandemic, during the pandemic, I was running my own business. I was actually in culinary education. And of course, as we know, during the pandemic, many businesses struggled with those restrictions that we had on running our workshops and so forth. And in the end, I decided that I may need to pivot to employment opportunities, and identified that working in sustainability or working in something that's very purpose driven would be the direction that I want to go in. I then worked at Movement for People with Intellectual Disabilities. And after working there and feeling more passionate about not only sustainability, but the social impact space, I went back to school to study ESG course. And through that studies, I landed at a project with Nespresso on their sustainability journey. And I shared with the Nespresso team that I'm looking to pivot into a career in ESG sector, and they shared with me a job description that opened up for a role at B Lab Singapore.
Wow. So was it the Nespresso based in Singapore that you had worked with?
Yes, their corporate office in Singapore.
Yeah, excellent. And Nozomi, maybe same question.
So my journey started, I would say, 2014, 15. Yeah. I just realized that it's been already 10 years. Yeah, someone told me that you have been doing this work past 10 years. So how I came to know B Corp is after university, I was working for financial industry for 15 years. And I really like that job. And then customer services and then risk management. But including myself, I saw a lot of passion, almost passion to the business from human beings. And then that is not bad. I'm not criticizing it at all. But I wondered if this direction a little bit changes to make the world better. So if the inner B Corp phrase, I think it was, if we use business as a force for good, what's going to happen? That was my very, very vague idea or almost a dream. But I didn't know social impact or B Corp at all. And after that job, I came to know social impact. And then I went to SOCAP with B Impact Hub Tokyo. And then through that journey, I came to know B Corporation. And I thought, oh, that's it. Yeah. Then I was trying to set up my own business, but in the end, I didn't. And then I joined Bali Books in 2015. Then Bali Books really respect Patagonia, which I respect too. Then we just realized that, oh, Patagonia is B Corp. And Bali Books was, at that time, was trying to find the kind of the indication or the milestones for the company to improve further, to make the better impact to the society and also for the better business. Then we decided to pursue the B Corp journey.
Yeah. And you successfully certified last year, right?
Yeah, finally.
Yes. It takes a long time sometimes.
Yes.
Sally, can you talk about the current state of the B Corp movement in China? Like, for example, how many B Corps exist and what's the sort of the growth looked like over the last few years?
Of course. As of now, there are 69 companies in mainland China that have obtained B Corp certifications, while some of these companies have chosen not to renew their certification after the 3-year period, but we still view this as a collective milestone. So we have 69 companies. That's the current state. But I know the community in Japan is growing really, really fast. So I'm curious about how's the state in Japan.
Yeah. So 69 companies in China, Nozomi. It's not a contest, but just...
Yeah. Not there yet, but 54 as of today. Yeah. But there are many in pipeline. Yeah.
Okay. And Cecilia, what about you in Singapore?
We have 53 B Corps in Singapore at the moment. If you ask about growth rate, last year we added 16 new B Corps to the community. So there was a good momentum. This year, it's a bit too soon yet to know the outcome. We have a good number of companies currently in our pipeline on the journey to certification.
Yeah. I was interviewing some folks from B Lab UK, and they said that there's 1,000 B Corps just in London, in one city. I was like, what? That's incredible. So I don't know. It's hard to meet that sort of growth. Nozomi, you were saying?
Sorry, yeah. I was trying to say that now we have China, Singapore, and then Japan, but we have a very good relationship with Asia teams. For example, Hong Kong, Macau, Korea, and also Southeast Asia. And then if we add up all those, and Taiwan, and if we add up all those Asian countries, I think it's between 300 and 400. Yeah. As of last year, we had already more than 300.
Yeah, and I think the amount of growth is high because it's like there was like a sort of low amount of companies, but now it seems like you've been adding, like you were saying, Cecilia, like 15 companies just in the last year and things like that, which is very interesting. I'm curious, maybe Nozomi, is there a company, a Japanese company that stands out as like a B Corp that you'd like maybe listeners to know about that's kind of compelling from your region?
Yes, there are many, but one company is called Farming Station. Unused part of rice, or mainly rice, and then ferment it, and then make it alcohol to use for, say, cosmetics or some other products. And then they are doing a lot of research and then development. And then they are a startup, and then they got award for carrying for Japan this year, and then now they are exhibiting in Change Now in Paris.
Oh,
just
right.
now.
Yeah, that's just happening. Yeah.
And then the owner of the company is women. And also they work with local area, which is Iwate Prefecture, northern area in Japan. So their work is very interesting.
Very cool. Cecilia, is there a company that stands out for you that you'd like to highlight?
There's so many of our B Corps, so when I speak to them, it's what keeps me engaged in my work, and that inspires me every single day to work with B Lab is the interaction with the companies, that's those that certify as well, those that's on the journey to certification, and just listening to them and seeing how they interact with the standards and then implement things in the company. So let me give a shout out to one of our first B Corp, Better Barista. They're actually the first B Corp in Southeast Asia. They've just recently, like in the last month, recertified for the 4th time. So I think using them as a model of what it looks like when a company stays on the journey, keep interacting with the standards and keep improving. So last month, they recertified with a score of 151 points, which was an increase. And when I speak to them about how they get their score up, so you can see through the recertification cycles, how they increase the score. And it really now shows that the work that they do goes down to the supply chain and to their partners. So it's not longer just the work they do within their company, but to get a score up, that engagement that we need from the partners that we work with, that engagement we need from our suppliers, the whole thought process of how we design our product makes that the efforts becomes really embedded in everything that they do. And it's a really nice example for me to see the power of B Corp and the standards.
Yeah. Wow. 4 recertifications. It's a lot to go through.
It's a lot of work. Yeah.
Yeah. And Sally, what about you? What's a company you want to highlight from China?
What has left a strong impression on me recently is Mumo, MUMO. So Mumo is the 60th B Corp certified company in mainland China. Mumo is an independent home design brand. So they mainly make solid wood furniture. So what impressed me was most recently I visited their store in Beijing. When I spoke with a store manager who has worked there for over 8 years, he shared how the factory, they have a factory in Wenzhou, China. So how the factory prioritize worker welfare by ensuring their rest time and minimizing the wood dust. In the factory, there are a lot of wood dust to the lowest as possible levels during the production process. Also, they are collaborating with Smart Air as another certified B Corps in China. So they have an initiative called Clean Air Zone. So to me, the tangible actions, like I really impressed. Yeah.
And Sally, in China, how are you finding consumers, or how do people find out about B Corps? Is it through social media or like news articles or searching the internet or word of mouth? Like, do you know much how like companies or people are finding out about B corporations in China?
I think in China, especially the younger generation, the younger consumers, when they go shopping, they will more see the value back to the products, not just the price. But for the year above 35 or even older, they will just compare the price, but not the story behind. Yeah. So usually the younger generation, they will search on the social media, or they will just use the little red book. Yeah. Which is very popular now.
Okay. Wait, what is that book? The little
red book.
Okay.
小红书. Yeah.
And what is that though? Is it a book that talks about different companies or impacts companies?
It's a social media platform.
Okay.
So most of our B Corps, they use Little Red Book to share their stories, doing campaigns on that.
Okay, because I was, I've lived in China, which you know about, and I know the Little Red Book was Mao Zedong's Little Red Book, right?
Oh, so, that's a different Red Book.
Different Red Book. Okay.
Yeah.
This
very
is a
popular
social media platform.
Yes, exactly.
There's like, wow, they're finding it out from Mao. No. Okay, good.
I have a question for Sally, actually.
Yeah.
Is that
Go
okay?
ahead, Nozomi. Yeah.
So fortunately, I had a fortune to join the Leaping Foundation's conference. Actually, that was the hosted by Leaping Foundation and also Beijing University. And then there is a philanthropic institution of Stanford University in Beijing. Then B Corp was one of the topics there. That was, I think, 2015. And if I remember correctly, the younger generation, especially from the family who made fortunes from the past, historically built up the fortune, they are very interested in using their money for the better society, especially for the social enterprises. So I was wondering how it's related to the B Corp movement, or how it is impacting in a good way, or any relation. If you could share that with us, that'd be great.
Yeah. Thank you, Nodomi. Thank you for your question. I think recent years we used to work with a lot of family offices or impact investors. I think they are keen to use their money to create a better society or better future for the next generation. Also, the BIA assessment also linked with the GRI and the ARIS, the impact reporting and investment standards. So that's helped them with the decision making. Yeah. For, responsible investment.
Got it. That's very helpful, Sally. Thank you for sharing. And thanks, Zoe. I'm curious, Cecilia, for you, what do you see as the challenges for businesses becoming B Corps? It may be the same as it is here or in other countries, but I'm curious, like, what do you see as some of the main reasons companies aren't doing it more, or what are you finding that people come up against?
Okay, yeah, that is such a good question, and one that we face on a daily basis in our work as well, where companies want to know what is the value of becoming a B Corp certified, and the challenge for us to communicate the value to aspiring B Corps or companies in general. And my takeaway with speaking to so many newly certified B Corps and companies on the journey is that the value for each company is very different. So there's not one thing I can say, value is that you're going to have greater consumer interest in your product, for example. Many times companies are sharing that is very intrinsic. So the value for us was that we can embed the values in the company, and we can communicate with our employees and demonstrate value to the employees and keep them committed. So that may not resonate with every company. So many companies are looking to embark on a certification project or on a project that will bring short-term ROIs, for example. And we don't have necessarily that data to demonstrate in Singapore specific that getting a B Corp certification will give you ROI in that manner, and the value you might derive is longer term, or it is in other ways. We have some of our B Corps that have been able to draw impact investment. So Sally was just talking about that as well. So that could be a potential, but it is hard work from B Corps. So we also talk about community, being part of the B Corp movement. We are building our community in Singapore, as well as many of the Asian countries as well. They're working hard to build community, but it's still for those B Corps to participate, to come to the events and to really reach out to other companies and to become active members of the impact and purpose-driven business community.
Very good. And for Nozomi, I remember one of the things that we talked about in a previous conversation was around like the culture, business culture in Japan. And do you find that it's a shift for many companies to like go into the purpose and profit, or do you feel like the business culture is already aligned? Does it make it easier? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think in general, the business culture in Japan is quite aligned with B Corp's value. Yes. But there are certainly some areas to improve, especially JEDI and then climate crisis. Yeah, there are many areas that we have to improve. So I think the very basic foundation of the B Corp spirit can be, I think, well accepted or well recognized, I think, easily. But we needed to, I think that our challenge is to use the right terminology or words so that we can make bridges what existing businesses are already doing, and then the B Corp, the terminology. And then we can make a shift so that we can move together with improvement. But in general, business culture is quite aligned with what we are talking about. Yes.
Yeah, and Sally, I've spoken with a few folks who grew up in China with around like just conservation and just sort of like being more aware of resource use than maybe people in the West can kind of be, because just growing up, at least when this woman was growing up in China, there wasn't like the infrastructure, the grid wasn't quite as built out. And so she was just more aware of conservation. It was actually more built into the culture of like just being more aware of what you're using. And do you find that in China, with the business culture there, do you find that the B Corp idea resonates, or what have you been seeing around that?
Yeah, I believe this isn't a challenge specific to our region. I think the B Corp movement itself represents the disruption of traditional business structures. In China, we often emphasize business for good. So for good to Chinese people is aligning more closely with our culture rooted in Confucian philosophy. So good is more like shan. You have to be a good person. However, what we truly hope for is that the business can balance between their commercial objectives and the social practices. I think sometimes they just confused. Yeah, they just put it like together. Yeah, they think doing good is doing public welfare or philosophy. Yeah, so that's different.
Yeah. And in China, does any government regulation or like, is the government involved in promoting B Corps or social business at all in your region?
In China, now we have really strong advocacy for sustainable development and carbon neutrality policies. But for B Corp, I think because we are a international standard, so from this perspective, it's difficult for relevant government department to like truly support this standard. Yeah, that's my opinion.
I'm curious, Nozomi, I had asked Sally about how people are finding out about B Corps, and maybe I'll ask you and Cecilia as well, because it's just interesting. Like, do you find any trends and how people are finding out about the movement in your area?
I think for Japan, the recognition or awareness is still low, I would say. Yeah. That's why we are very excited to work on this. But I think people get to know B Corp through some products and also through some companies and also through media. So after, say, 2021, 22, from my point of view, I see more and more media coverage in Japanese about B Corporation. Yeah. I'm checking the status. So, for example, before I see really the global brands are certified. And then that company does business in Japan too. But I do not think that I have seen many the publications or announcements about a B Corp certification in Japanese for that global brands. But recently I see more and more, even though they do not have Japanese entities. So throughout those articles and then media coverage, I think people started getting to know there is a lot to improve or, yes, to explore still.
Yeah. And Cecilia, how are folks finding out about it in your experience in Singapore?
Yeah, I think I can echo much of what Nozomi shared just now. To add, so it's very much similar in Singapore. We also see that quite a number of the B Corps that we have in Singapore, they have founders or they have people involved in the organization that found out from B Corp internationally. So maybe they have a relationship with companies in Europe, or they themselves could be founders that are from Europe and they have known about B Corp standards before from there. And yeah, the international community of B Corps, I think, is really powerful. They have potential to really move the needle in terms of consumer awareness. So in Singapore, for example, we have more than 300 international B Corps with operations here. Some of the big brands, if you go to a store and you can buy Patagonia goods in some of the outdoor stores, we have in almost every mall, there's either Aesop or L'Occitane store, Brompton Bicycle. For example, some of these big companies that are operational in Singapore and that have consumer-facing operations, I think through their product displays using of the B Corp logo and education that they can bring to consumers could be a valuable tool to further that awareness.
Maybe I'd be really curious to jump in on some of the new standards questions. When we originally scheduled this podcast, a couple months ago, the new standards weren't out yet, but now they are. And I'm curious if, Nozomi, when you read through them, or maybe it's been shared in some of the groups that you're part of with the B Corp community in Japan, has anyone said like, oh yeah, these sections should be easy, but I don't know how we're going to do these sections, or what's been coming up for you in those discussions?
Yes. So for Japan, I would say, I think justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, JEDI, would be one of the challenging ones, but that is something that we definitely need to work on. And also, I hear some voices that government affairs and collective action. So, yeah, for that, people are not saying that it's difficult to do, but I think we are not used to do that. So I think we just need to find a path to work collectively.
And Sally, what about you? Same question.
I'm still learning the new standard, the evolution of standard.
You haven't
But
memorized all 1,000 pages of the PDF
yes,
yet?
yeah, yes, we are organizing, the internal workshop to learn the new standard. But I'm really happy to see the B Corp community is built on the principle of continuous improvement. So I think the US, the new standard showed this, as we want companies to continuous improve. But in our region, I think we still have a lot of explanation costs. So we have to, study first.
Yeah. And Cecilia, what do you think for you?
Personally, I'm very excited about the new standards. Since I joined B Lab almost 2 years back, I've been continuously reading about the new standards. They had the early on engagement session with B Lab employees as well to bring us through the standards. So to finally see it published is really exciting. There's so much knowledge to be gained in the new standard. So just as a geek in the space, it's amazing to work with that. From our community, I think it's a little bit early on to give accurate feedback. I spoke to somebody last night who's B Corp that's they are expected to recertify on the new standards in 2026. So the initial thoughts there was very positive, and they commented on the interoperability of the new standards with other standards, and that they appreciate that. That is very clearly communicated and thought through. And then again, what Nozomi said on certain areas that may be a little bit hard, I think our B Corps maybe need a little bit more time to digest. And some of the topic names, for example, human rights, when our communities see words like human rights, they may take it as I want to say criticism, but they were just looking at the topic heading. What we think is in the standard maybe is not exactly what is in the standard. So, for example, in human rights, if you read further into the requirements and what it covers, it's very much already aligned with what our businesses in Singapore, with our values in Singapore again, and of our business community. So, yeah, I think that's having to really paint a clear picture on what is the sub requirements in each of the topics, and showing our businesses that there is really a pathway for you to meet the requirements. It's not that daunting. That would be our job for the months ahead.
Can I just add one more thing? Yeah, from the One B Corp perspective, which is ValueBooks, my company. Yeah, so for ValueBooks, when we were certified, not many people in the company were involved. So me and then a few more people. But with these new standards, this is a great opportunity for us to start with everyone, not necessarily everyone, but with a lot more people together. So we are planning to have study sessions. But at the same time, we already started thinking that how we can use the new standards, incorporate with the work that we are already doing. So as a matter of fact, we are discussing yesterday that there is one kind of area that we'd like to improve as fast as soon as possible. And then we decided to use a new standard and then see if we can improve a lot of our stuff and better. Okay. Yeah. And also this is related to the previous question about how people know the B Corp as well. But today it's April 21st in Japan. And then yesterday, one of the magazines covering B Corp in couple of pages was published. And then the theme of that magazine or that feature is new work or new job and our future. And then that highlighted a B Corp. And Yuki, my colleague, and then myself were speaking about a B Corp there. And then using that opportunity going forward, we can split how new standards are evolved and then how we can use that standard, even not only for B Corps, but for any businesses.
Yeah. And I think you've mentioned to me, Nozomi, in Japan, the justice, equity, diversity, inclusion component in the US and maybe in other places around the world. Usually when we think of JEDI here in the US, it's often related to like racial equity but you've explained to me in Japan, it's less of that and more of like male and female. Could you maybe speak more about like how Jedi would show up maybe differently in your region?
Yeah. So for Japan, we definitely have many Jedi issues or challenges, I would say. Japanese, Korean, Japanese, and also indigenous groups in Japan, etc. But we already know that the gender inequality is a huge issue in Japan. Notoriously worst. I think that was worst 13 years. So that is something that we have to really work on. And then business has a huge responsibility for that. So executives also the payment equality. And then as a matter of fact, Value Books decided to improve that area throughout the B Corp journey.
That's great. So it's evidence the B Corp works even in your own company, right? It's like making some changes. Yeah. And for you, Sally, how do companies that you're talking to, or how are you seeing the justice, equity, diversity, inclusion show up? Like, do you think is it similar to Japan where it's more male, female, or how are you seeing it show up for China?
First of all, I have to admit it's a huge topic. And in China, we also have gender issues. But now I can see more business, they take more responsibilities. In China, we usually use D&I or DEI. But they take more responsibilities. Maybe people with disabilities, they have a lot of challenges, and aging societies. Yeah, because we have a huge population of aging people. So those main areas, I see more companies take more time to find solutions. But as for the gender and for some minority groups, there is still a lot of room to improve. That's why we've been having conversation with a lot of business leaders and CSR, they in charge of the CSR departments. They take this as priority, not just the carbon, the community, but also the topics for people with people. That's really important. And when they talk about ESG, Chinese companies, they see ESG as very important, but they usually focus on E and G, but not as the social responsibilities, the people-centered, human-centered. Yeah. So there's a lot of things we need to improve.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I've seen China leading on so many environmental places, like the most solar, sort of moving towards decarbonizing the economy. What do you see on the G? Like, what are the things that China's working on the governance side?
Governance. Usually it's just the board of directors. They use their company's handbook or menu book to make decisions or have something they want to distribute to the employees. That's the G in their eyes. Yeah. The G in our eyes is more related to transparency. Or even when you make an investment decision, you have to let everyone know why we made this decision, why they are our investors, why we chosen them, not the other one. Yeah. So yes. Yeah.
And Cecilia, in terms of Jedi or DEI in Singapore, what are sort of the main issues that you see to be worked on?
For Singapore, because the society in Singapore or our government in Singapore has always been of the stance of sort of equality and making sure that all communities are anti-discrimination, and the way we speak about the different racial groups and religious groups has really been one of the foundations of Singapore. So within our business community, I think it's one of the values that typically is ingrained in the businesses in Singapore. I'm not so sure. So many of our companies in Singapore have major operations elsewhere. So they may have headquarters in Singapore where we will see equal opportunities for male and female, how that looks down in their other operations in other regions. I'm not so sure yet. So that potentially could be, how do we make sure that the JEDI principles trickles down through the whole organization and not only in the head office situation.
Yeah, I think, one thing that I had a mixed reaction about in the new standards was I was actually excited that all the companies I thought were going to be required to do science-based targets. They kept it for the medium and large companies, or actually maybe it's large only. I can't remember where they cut it off, but I don't know. Nozomi, was there any parts, maybe that part or other things that you were hoping would actually be included, like more than what's included in the standards?
Yeah, I think it's already a lot to work on. So this might not be answering your question, but I think in terms of the areas, we or each B Corp will really diligently work on these areas that will cross cover the issues. So for example, JEDI and then climate actions, then that will cover holistically. And then I think the new standard and also the requirement will cover more holistically or require the companies to work on more holistically without dropping on their preferences. So yeah, that is not allowed. So I think that is a good part. And then the very important thing is to really understand the requirements fully. And then, standards fully. And then put the actual actions. Yeah. Then by doing that, we may be missing something from the current new standards. I think it's good now, but throughout the journey, we may find something that we have to add on. Then I think that will evolve over time.
Yeah, I agree. Like, this is still the final standards of the first iteration, because, I think in 3 years, B Lab will probably make changes to the standards. So it's not like this is forever, the standards. Maybe, Sally, for you, one of the more hot button issues in the B Corp community is around, certifying multinationals like Nespresso and other large companies. And some have accused that as being part of greenwashing or trying to make it sound. And so I'm curious, do you see that as being an issue? Like, have you heard people saying, like, about B Corps in your region, like, oh, that's greenwashing, or that's like, how are you sitting with the idea of like including large companies like multinationals in the community, and also like very small companies? Like, how are you sitting with that or grappling with that?
Yeah, I'm not sure how that, like in Japan and Singapore. In China is quite interesting. When the multinational company join the community, the big names, there's always B Corp say, oh, why they became a B Corp, like why, like what they did good. So they're always asking me and our community manager. Well, I have to say, from my personal perspective, we shouldn't assume the B Corp community is perfect. But this is precisely why prioritizing tangible actions over commitments matters. I think that's also linked to the new standard and why the certification standards undergo continuous evolution to address these systematic challenges. So greenwashing is happening, over across the industries. Yeah. So I wouldn't say our community is perfect, but we see their actions, not just commitments.
Yeah. And Cecilia, I'm wondering, for you, since there are so many large brands based in Singapore, maybe it's a different, and it's interesting because you actually found out about the B Corp movement through Nespresso. So that's actually a reason, that's like a positive thing. But how are you sitting with that question of like multinationals and large brands? And does your community react in that way of like, oh, why is this company in? Or how are you sitting with all of that?
We're usually quite excited about seeing big names joining the B Corp movement. And I think knowing the amount of work that goes into certifying, for example, some of the bigger brands, we had Health and Happiness group that certified actually in Hong Kong. Their head office is on Hong Kong. And we did employee engagement workshop for them in March as part of our B Corp month that was co-hosted by B Lab Hong Kong. And in this employee engagement workshop, they actually dialed in all the offices around Asia, dialed in. And the sustainability team and the management team then spoke about their B Corp certification journey. And it is so rigorous for these large companies. So they had to complete 7 B impact assessments as part of their certification. So I think sort of being able to communicate that rigor that large organizations go through, and that it's not just, oh, they filled in 1 B impact assessment and they got it. They have things like the score roll up. They have to really coordinate their efforts across so many different markets where each market will have their unique challenges. So kudos to them. A lot of respect to these companies who actually put in the time, effort, the teams together to get that certification. And then on the second point, I know Nespresso currently is working towards their recertification. I saw a post yesterday on LinkedIn from one of the sustainability team or managers at Nespresso that was talking about the recertification. And they're taking it very seriously. And they think with all the pressure that was on them, they have a responsibility. They feel this responsibility that, we have to really prove what we are doing. And they put in so much effort again across multiple B impact assessments and so forth. So, I think for small companies, sometimes it's much easier for us to get certified and to control the operations within one region or market. And for the larger ones, it is a big effort, and we can learn from them in some ways.
I actually worked with H&H Group in the US. I helped their US entity certify. I'm not sure if you knew that. I'm a big fan of their work, and Pascal is their sustainability director for the global. Yeah, Nozomi, how are you feeling? Greenwashing, multinationals, big companies. Should we let them in? Should we keep them out? How are you feeling about that?
I have an experience that I worked for a very, very big company, multinational. So I think the impact that those businesses have huge, whether we like or not. So those to really realize what we are trying to achieve through B Corp movement, all the businesses needed to get on board. Yes, whether that's B Corp or not. And then to be certified as B Corp makes the company, let me step back. So that will company to kind of make a commitment to align with the value and then to do the actions. And also, if those companies announce that we are B Corp, their people, their consumers and then employees and then all the stakeholders are watching, I think making that environment will help as well. It's kind of locked in a sense. So I think it's a positive thing. And then we know that the new standards will help a lot more than before. So, yeah. And if greenwashing happens, people will know.
So here's a follow-up question on that is one of the podcast episodes I did early on was number 4 was with Arench Sahan, who works for Donut Economics, and his critique of the B Corp movement. And I wanted to get each of your opinions on this because I think it's really fascinating. Is he kind of has said there is a large part of the B Corp community that believes in win-win, which is you make more money, you do more impact, and then but profit and purpose are combined. So that would be like, his critique is like, that's a lot of the B Corp community where if you just make profit and purpose together, then we're going to change the economy. And then he also says there are some companies in the B Corp community that they're not really, they think that, well, I'm actually going to make a lot less profits by making more purpose. Like maybe I have shared ownership with all the staff. And so my company won't maybe make as much money because I'm prioritizing purpose more. And his critique is that in the B Corp community, we've created a place where you have multinationals who are profit first, but have aspects of sustainability. Like Nespresso is actually doing a lot of interesting things around regenerative agriculture and agroforestry and biodiversity and these environmental things, but they still have a profit motive for shareholders. And then there's other companies which are like, maybe it's a coffee company that donates 50% of their profits back to the farmers. And so what he says is there's a risk in the B Corp community of making it equivalent that if you're a B Corp, you're just as like, and you're Nespresso, you're just as impactful as the coffee company that donates 50% of profits to charity. And so he was sort of saying we need to be more careful about, like, not every B Corp is the same, but I don't know. It's a tough question, and I'd be curious how you feel about that.
Yeah, it is a tough one, but I'd say I think profit is still important for business, but I think for the B Corp movement, especially in Japan, what we are talking is we needed to work more with investors and shareholders so that they can be a part. Actually, they are already in part of the community, but to become truly the part of community so that their motivation aligned with B Corp as well. I think, but with the current standard and also the new standards and also the legal requirement, the current B Corps, the investors that have the value aligned with their values. So that should already exist. But for the new investors or when business gets a difficult time and then try to find the way to survive or thrive so that the purpose is protected, we need to work beforehand so that those investors or shareholders can work on with those companies.
It's a tough question. I don't know the answer. I don't know if Sally, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, that's why I was saying the companies, they often confuse this part of the content with doing public welfare or public good. So there's a difference between B Corp and social enterprise. So in China, we always tell our audiences, the company's business, there's a difference between social enterprise and B Corp. So for B Corp, you have to be a for-profit company first. And I think sometimes the companies, they're just reluctant to consider their own impact business mode. That's why we encourage them to fund their IBM or their products or services can truly achieve business growth by solving a certain social problems, but not just solving the social problems by donating money or other stuff. Donating money is good, but sometimes they just don't feel they have IBM, but they do. Sometimes when we do the consultation or the process with the business, we found out that they do have a IBM or they have a small impact business model that can grow in the future. So for me, I really feel they can more consider this part of,
Thank you. It's a tough question. I'm still grappling with it. Yeah, Cecilia, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, it is a tough question for me. I think one of the things that stands out from B Corp certification and maybe some of the other frameworks or certification is the transparency that the B Lab is trying to create. So through having the public database of B Corps, the directory of B Corps, where anybody can go and look at the B Corp, at the score, at the areas where they have scored. If there was additional transparency requirements, they can see it on the public directory as well. So people who maybe criticize or want to know what is the difference between one B Corp and another B Corp, that would be the first point where they can go and have a look at the information. And then, of course, further go to the company's websites and really look at what they are doing. And again, our B Corps don't say that they are perfect. And one B Corp score could be double that of another B Corp score. And then look at why that is, look at how many certification cycles a B Corp has gone through. Maybe they have been in the community for 10 years or 12 years. Patagonia has been with us for, I don't have many, I think 5 recertification cycles, and that helps their score to go up. As what Sally said on the IBMs as well. So look at the IBMs. It's on the public profile. You can also see if they have specific IBMs. So you can look at that to see specific impact areas that are focusing on.
In relation to this question, I'm more curious about how we can explain better or how we can work better so that companies can fully feel that using business as a force for good is not the kind of the additional requirement. Yeah. It's how we make a profit. And then how is divided into many sections in the standards, B Corp standards. So sometimes I get a question from the company in Japan, not necessarily B Corps, but for example, sustainability development goals. Sometimes they say, we don't know how we can use our business to achieve those goals. And then they try to find something new areas or something new or new partnerships. But the existing business already has a lot of areas to be improved with standards. So that is already incorporated with their businesses. So I think that is sort of related to the questions that we have now. Yeah.
That is such a spot-on response, Nozomi. I think the same for us. We always get it when companies or encouraging them to just run through the standards. And many times they come back and say, oh, after we have run through the standards, we found that we're doing a lot of things good already. And they feel encouraged that they can quite easily improve some of those things further with small actions.
Yeah, and sometimes they do not look at the members of executive directors in terms of gender equality or gender gap, and then leaving that behind. What else can we do? No, you have to work on that. That's what I say.
I love that. Sally, maybe, moving towards the last couple of questions here, what do you think needs to change with the B Corp movement to make it more impactful in your region, if anything?
I think in our region, their unified voice is important. I think for the past years, we see the individual B Corp and we see their individual efforts, but there are no collective actions. But for the past B Corp months, in March, we have encouraged almost 24 B Corps in mainland China. Some of them are mainland China certified, some of them are international B Corps. Yeah, they work together. Groups for specific topic, for specific campaign. So I think unified voice is important. Yeah, I think for future it's the same. We go this way to push them for like collective things. Yeah.
Cecilia, what about you? What could make it more impactful in your region?
So yes, very much what Sally said on that collective action. I think in our new standards, we also use the word very clearly, collective action. And that also have to speak to the way that B Lab and B Market Builder operates in Asia. So I can see with the new standards, as well as the last B Corp month, much more joint efforts around Asia to co-create events and to co-create campaigns. So that is really important, and we can continue to work towards that community between the various B labs in Asia and the B Market Builder teams as well.
Yeah. And Nozomi, any changes you'd like to see?
Yes. So throughout the B Corp journey that we had so far, I think having the real actual standards, actual B Corp standards, makes the company easier to communicate. For example, even the pain as well. So it's not a big conversation. Put the standards in center, and we can have a discussion or dialogues. And that really helps for companies to collaborate. And in the B Corp month, the B Market Builder Japan set up some sessions for B Corps to collaborate using Miro. Then several ideas came up, and then several B Corps worked together to have events or study sessions. And then I am hoping that will continue more. And then for that activities, not only, the CEOs or CDOs or executives, but many workers, if we can include more and more workers to that activity, I think we can learn each other faster and better. And then, and we will have the more collective actions. And then when we have something that we'd like to get together to solve, I think it's going to be easier. So that change we'd like to make.
And Nozomi, maybe this last question for you is, like, how can listeners support your work? And is there anything you need right now that the listeners can support with?
Oh, thank you. So recently, when we have a guest from outside of Japan, we usually have events and then learn from them. So as a matter of fact, last week we had one company, B Corp, Jason Mark, based in LA, but they have business in Japan too. So we visited their shop, we did an interview, and also they hosted a shuke. Actually, they are a shuke brand. So they did the shuke workshop. That really connected people. So if any B Corps outside of Japan have chance to come to Japan, please let us know. And then I think in that case, not necessarily B Market Builder Japan, but B Corps might be able to lead their event as a community.
Very cool. And maybe do you want to drop like any website or links that people might learn more about your movement?
Yes. Will do. Yeah.
And Sally, what about you? Anything you need right now? And then how can the listeners help support your work?
I think similar to Nozomi. So if we have global B Corp who is listening this episode and who is operating in China or have office in China, please contact us. We have a lot of B local events that you could join, or your employee could join. Also, if we have listener who want to help us do some benchmarking studies or global webinars to make more diverse conversation in the future, can also please contact us. Thank you, Ryan.
I love it. Cecilia, anything you need?
Yeah, it sounds like we all have the same ask here today.
That's good.
So I also had on my list to reach out for global B Corps that have operations in Singapore or that visits through Singapore. We're always happy to meet up with them. Our B Lab team in Singapore would be happy to have a conversation or a coffee to understand your operations in Singapore and to see how we can collaborate in future. our local B Corps would very much appreciate meeting up with the larger B Corps and to understand how they grow their businesses. So yes, growing that community would be awesome. We have a newsletter as well, and we're happy to feature some of the global B Corps that operates in Singapore and showcase their products and services in our newsletter to create that awareness. So yeah, they can reach out to the B Lab Singapore team.
Sorry, but let me add one more thing. Sorry, I'm adding and adding. Actually, I was in Spain until last week for the meetings, and then also visiting the B Corp Spain and then the B Corp as well, based in Barcelona. And then one thing that there was one very interesting finding from there. I heard that from the member of B Corp Spain that they hear from the B Corps in Barcelona or Spain that actually they get the questions, why less B Corps in Asia compared to other regions? And then one, I was kind of amazed that they know that. And then two, from B Lab or B Market Beta perspective, we really care how diverse the community is. So I understand that. But from B Corps, yeah, that was another amazing point that they care as well. And then I asked why they care. I thought that might be very question, but I asked for both for B Lab and then B Corp. And then both said, one, from B Lab Spain, what I had was one, if a specific region is not included in the community, the standard or activity or movement might be biased or not inclusive. So I said that we are included, so please do not worry. But in terms of the numbers, I see their concern. And then number two, from the business perspective, when they get into the Asian market, it is very important for them to know that B Corps are there, even though they're different industry. It's not like we go out to explore the field that no one knows. Rather than that, it is so important to know, the B Corps are there and then contact and that's through them. So that really impacts the business. That's what I said. So I got more motivation to drive the movement. Yeah.
I think you touch on a really good point that maybe we can wrap with, which is it's so nice that with B Corp, one of the things I love is that you can go anywhere in the world. And if you see a person that works for another B Corp, it's like you already feel like friends. You're like, oh, I know you're a B Corp too. And maybe it's part of the shared trauma of going through the assessment. It's like, it's so difficult that when you do it, you're like, hey, I know you've been through the same thing. So I want to thank the three of you for coming on and sharing about the growth in Asia and each of your respective countries. I think it's really important that we sort of continue to grow this movement globally. And I just want to appreciate all of you for doing that in really important areas. And so thank you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us, Ryan. It was awesome to see Nozumi and Sally as well on this call. So, awesome.
Hey, Beyond the Bee listeners. If you're looking for even more inspiring conversations with leaders on the front lines of our movement towards just futures, be sure to subscribe to Next Economy Now, produced by the team at Lift Economy. Next Economy Now broadens the focus beyond the B Corp movement to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, democratic, equitable, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy. Check out our latest episodes at lifteconomy.com/podcast. You can subscribe to Next Economy Now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.